field here, the field of classics and classical civilization at Syracuse University. Few things about myself. So my own, exposure, introduction to classical languages, especially, goes way back to my studying in high school. I'm from the Netherlands, as you probably can hear, or at least you probably hear some weird accents. So I'm Dutch, and in the Netherlands, it's very common, that people learn Latin and Greek in high school still today. So I had the fortune to start studying there, and continued my studies actually not in classics. I continued with philosophy and religion, or better formulated in theology, and also got a degree in philosophy. But doing that, I kept always busy with Latin especially. So by the time I finished my graduate degree, I started teaching Latin and Greek in high schools in the Netherlands. And then when we moved to the US, I was able to continue on college level. And I feel very privileged because it's the most beautiful thing to teach, really. I'm very, feel very privileged that I can do this type of work that I am doing. And even though, my detour, my road into it was a little bit by detour, I'm really glad that, I'm a classicist of sorts. My own research, by the way, is not directly related to the classical period, but more to the medieval period. So I'm basically a medievalist by training, but you know perhaps that Latin was a language used for many, many centuries. And that's basically the main reason why we still learn it today, because, there's so much important stuff written over many, many centuries that it is still, a language we cannot do without. It's crucial. And I think that Professor Ellie will talk more about that in a few minutes. Let me first tell you a little bit about our program. So at Syracuse University, we have two major branches in our classics program, which the first one is the language emphasis. So we have a classics major and a classics minor, which means that if you are really totally excited about learning Latin or learning Greek, you can get that major in either language. And I will spare you all the details of the program. Of course, I will be happy to go more into depth with you if you have specific questions. What you see here are just the ramifications of the classics major with an emphasis on either Latin or Greek. And again, Professor Ellie went through this whole program, so he knows it really by firsthand. Also, please take note of the website. It's a very long name here. If you just Google LLL Classics, you will immediately get to this website where you find all the information about the requirements of our classics majors and minors and classical civilization. So LLL, by the way, stands for the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Linguistics, of which we are part. So basically, the majority of all foreign languages at Syracuse University and linguistics are part of one big department. So within our section of classics, we have classical civilization, classics majors and minors. But we also have, and this is very popular and perhaps most interesting for most of you, we have a classic civilizations major or minor. This is especially popular for students within our department, within our program, because if you suppose you have an interest in classical civilization, you have an historical interest, you have an interest in religion, art history, philosophy, you can more or less compile your own program, couple your own program together. Of course, you have to consult the program director, Professor Carnes, but you have a lot of liberty to build your own program, basically, and that is very appealing to a lot of students, especially if they want to combine a major or minor in classical civilization with a major, for instance, in history or religion. we see a lot of those crossovers. So the combinations of majors happening between our department and other departments. Again, a lot of technical details. The basic idea is you have a lot of liberty to build your own program and pursue your own personal interests. So that's, I think, the great plus of doing classical civilization, major or minor. Well, the question that, of course, is very relevant and might be looming in the back of your head is, if you study classics, what are the job perspectives? Where do people with this type of degree end up? Let me first start by saying most humanities disciplines see that their students, that people who major in, for instance, history or art history, a majority of them will end up in jobs that are not directly related to the field that they've disciplined, but they have acquired skills that make them universally eligible for a great number of jobs. But if we talk about specific destinations to which a classics degree leads, are of course subjects in the profession itself, like teaching Latin or Greek or ancient history in high schools. That is probably still the biggest venue for professions of people who get a classics degree. Also, if you are really excited about the field and you want to stay in academia, then of course you can try to pursue a PhD at one of the schools that offer PhDs. We don't do that. Also, if you have an interest to pursue a PhD in a related field like history or religion, having some coursework or perhaps a minor even in classics is gonna tremendously boost your chances to apply for the type of PhD programs. This doesn't, by the way, necessarily relate to history and religion at all. I also know that if you're interested, for instance, in pursuing a legal career or getting a law degree, then having classics under your belt is definitely going to help you. So, for instance, this year at Syracuse University in the law program, a student of mine was accepted for a PhD trajectory, and he was very good at Latin, and I'm 100% positive that helped him get into the law program at SU. But returning to the first point I wanted to make, so having the skills to analyze text, to express yourselves clearly in writing, to having a lot of language expertise under your belt makes you qualifiable for a lot of different jobs in wider fields like businesses like publishing and advertising. You see that classicists end up in museums, in archives, in libraries. I just mentioned, of course, legal profession already. Writing jobs like grant applications, that seems to me to be a ever bigger business these days, is definitely a good field to where people with classics degree can now end up. And of course, I don't know anyone personally, but I do imagine, and I find it's, I actually have no doubt whatsoever that people with a classics degree might end up in tourism, knowing so much about various destinations in Europe, Northern Africa, and the Near East. So going back to Syracuse University, if you study classics with us, then a wonderful opportunity to apply your knowledge or to deepen your knowledge of classics is facilitated by the fact that we have an SU Abroad facility in Florence, an SU Abroad program in Florence. We also have one in Madrid and various other European destinations. I think Strasbourg is on the books now. So if you go there, if you are lucky to be accepted in those programs, then you have a great opportunity to learn more about classical civilization, about the languages, in situ, basically, on the site itself. And especially Florence is of course, would be my dream to actually go to if I had the chance to do it again. In addition, there are a lot of international summer schools and archaeological camps that students go to in order either to improve their language skills or just to get some experience with or figure out whether they might be interested in archaeology, or just spend the summer in an educative and fun way. Speaking of summer programs and other programs, a quick scroll online just an hour ago taught me that there is a very wide range of undergraduate fellowships, so stipends, money available. Of course, they have all different ramifications and conditions, but if you are a student of classics, an undergraduate student, there is a lot of money that you could cobble together in order to pursue international ambitions, like spending some time abroad in Europe. Here, look, for instance, here there's a traveling fellowship. So either of us, Professor Ali, Carnes, or myself, or Professor Deem would be most willing to help you out, getting a better grip of these opportunities. And finally, a little bit of the sort of obligatory slides. So are there any famous classicists that you might know? Frankly, I do not know all these people. Some of them are really, a different generation than I am, I guess. But this person, for instance, maybe not the best example for to propagate now, because I don't like this person at all. But he's the Prime Minister of Britain. He got a classics degree in probably Oxford or Cambridge. The author of Harry Potter, what's her name again?
J.K. Rowling.
Yes, Rowling, she got a classics degree. Other famous people, Dubois, the famous anthropologist he was in Baltimore, I think, early 1900s. Sigmund Freud, I didn't know that. Not all these people actually got like a master's or a PhD in classics, but some of them only sort of dabbled around in classics. Still, it's a field that is widely studied, and it's the best and most interesting study possible. And with these words, I would like to finish my presentation and give the word then to Professor Ali. So I'll stop sharing this.
Thanks so much. Yeah, Freud is really interesting because not only was he a classicist, but he was actually in the same class as Theodore Mommsen, who's the only historian to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Who wrote the famous history of the Roman Empire. So he was very well classically educated. Not only that, but he was a student of Ulrich von Wilamowitz, who is one of the biggest names of the 19th century too. So very steeped in the classical tradition. So thank you. My name is Professor Ali. I am a graduate of the Syracuse Classics program. I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience with classics and what classics can do for you. So let's see if I can get my share screen. Continue. All right, I think we're ready to go. All right, are we seeing it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to start with a question that I heard many times as an undergraduate. So as a person who grew up in upstate New York myself, first generation student in a community that, wasn't maybe as familiar with a lot of the academic opportunities out there. When people would ask me, what are you studying in college? I said, well, I study the classics. And the look I got and the question I almost always heard was, why would you do that? What are you doing with that? Why would you study that? So my hope today was to talk about just that, why you would do that, why you would make that decision, and why it's a really great decision to do. So what are the classics? How are they situated in the academic field and general studies at the university? Well, fascinatingly, when we look at our own country, the history of the United States, the classics play an absolutely integral role in their foundation and in their development. So that's really where I would like to start. So law, governance, and civics. So I think I saw the question asked in the chat, how does classics, how does Latin, how does the study of this field help prepare you for law? Well, this is a question that I actually am quite familiar with because my wife is actually in law school. And the one thing she frequently tells me is, I really wish I had studied Latin as an undergrad now. So why is it that it's so important? Why does it help so much? Well, many of the legal terms that you see employed to this very day are just Latin. They're untranslated Latin. So you frequently see them in textbooks italicized because they're still in the Latin. And rather than memorizing a term, ultimately, in a way that is kind of divested from a larger context, it's just much easier if you know the Latin immediately. So she frequently asks me, what's this word mean? How do you pronounce it? So on and so forth. So that's one way. But the kind of more exciting and really, really more, steeped in the classical tradition is just how invested in the classics our country's founders were. So it's really important when we look at the history of our country to think about who the founders of the country were and what kind of educational experience they had. What's really fascinating when we look at these figures is that we see a large number of them had started their classical education by the age of 7 or 8. Imagine that if we were going to elementary school now and in 2nd or 3rd grade, you're starting ancient Greek or Latin. For them, it was very practical because the university, if we're looking at the universities that they attended, Harvard, William and Mary, Yale, Columbia, to enter those in the first place, you need to be able to sight translate, that is, get a passage from Virgil, Homer, Herodotus, and be able to translate it at sight. And if you couldn't do that, they'd say, oh, they don't think you're quite university material. So it was an absolutely essential gatekeeper to attending university in the first place. But the excitement, the joy, the real pleasure that they each had in learning these languages and thinking about these texts and thinking about the histories invested in them really influenced their sort of intellectual development, especially in accompaniment with the period of the Enlightenment that they were living through. These ideas, both the classical past and the contemporary discussions of political philosophy, really ignited in them a passion for these ancient political concepts. So if we look at, some of our leading figures, someone like Thomas Jefferson, who studied at William and Mary, he began his classical education at 8. And not only did he begin it at 8, but he, in his personal correspondences, frequently wrote to friends, political rivals, everyone in either French or very often ancient Greek, which he absolutely adored. He was very intensely invested in the ancient Greek philosophers, especially Plato. So it's not uncommon. In fact, in the next slide, I have an example of his handwriting. He had beautiful Greek handwriting. Like, I'm incredibly jealous when you see just how masterful his Greek handwriting was. But that's how intimately they cared about and believed in the fundamental position of the classics in the society that they were helping to create. And not only were they thinking about it in sort of large and sort of impersonal ways, but they looked at very specific texts. In fact, it's been argued that the ancient historian Polybius should be made an honorary founding father, because a single book from his histories of the Roman Empire was absolutely essential for the founders. This is where they get the idea of the tripartite government from. So Polybius, when he's writing his history, when he's talking about the Roman Empire, what he's interested in is, how is it that Rome came to conquer the world in his time? He was a Greek. He was a Greek exile living in Rome. And he was astonished by this thing. So he looks at historical forms of governance. He looks at other Greek city-states, why they were successful, why they failed, and why Rome was just so incredibly successful to a degree that had never been seen before in the world. His answer was the government. So when he goes through and studies the government, when he looks at what this was that was so successful and why, his answer is, it's this tripartite division. It's these three different parts of the government constantly competing among and with one another for success. When the founders read that, they said, this is it right here. We don't want kings. We don't want oligarchs. We want all of these tendencies. We want the monarchical tendency. We want the oligarchical tendency, and we want the democratic tendency, all of balancing among one another. So the Senate would be reflective of something like an oligarchy. The presidency would be reflective of our monarchy. And then, of course, our Congress itself, the Supreme Court would be the oligarchy, and then the Congress itself would be more directly representative of the democracy, so direct representation. So it's very neat to see this. And there's a long history of these kinds of political discussions in ancient Greek texts. We see it actually in our very first ancient historian, Herodotus. In book 3 of his histories, he has Persian speakers contemplate the best form of government. What is it that we should have after they overthrow their monarchy? Well, should we have a democracy? Should we have an oligarchy? Or should we have the kingship still? So these discussions are very, very early, and they lead to the development of this idea of an anakyklosis theory, or the idea that history repeats itself. It's just always going around in a kind of circle. Herodotus talks about this already. And this, again, is something that our founders believed in very intimately. They cared very immensely about this idea. Now, of course, we can take it or leave it nowadays, but the notion that the past offers some kind of roadmap for the future, that if we have a form of governance that's existed before, if we implement that form of government, what kind of problems are going to happen? How can we anticipate them? How can we solve them potentially? For our founders, they truly believed that if we look to Greece and Rome that had these republican forms of governance, that was the way to do it. So that's one great way that studying the classics helps prepare you for any one of these things, be it law directly, a form of governance, or just something engaged in civics in your own personal life. It's really, really incredibly valuable because you see the text that they were looking at. You can really understand the founders and the principles of governance that they were arguing for so intensely at this time already existing 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. 1,500 years ago. So it's really extraordinary to be able to see that. And not only that, but when we look at our founding documents, something like the Declaration of Independence, the US Constitution itself, we can see places where they're basically lifting lines from ancient texts themselves. It's really quite remarkable. So that's the first place that I kind of want to emphasize. Why would you study that? Well, here's a huge answer to that question right here. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in the government, the country that I live in. So that's one reason why. On the next slide here, this has had to be dedicated, just to Jefferson because he was just such a extraordinary Philhellene. So you can see in the architecture of his home, Monticello, this again is Greco-Roman influence. It's designed from the Pantheon in Rome. It's his home in Virginia. At the top right, absolutely stunning Greek handwriting from one of his personal correspondences in Greek. It's a quotation from the Odyssey. And then, of course, we have his handwritten form of the Declaration of Independence itself. So if for no other reason that you get to access more of the intellectual thought and political engagement of Thomas Jefferson, that alone would be a great reason to study classics, but he's just one of so many. Well, unsurprisingly, another great avenue to pursue and to be interested in and to gain additional access to is through literature. So this is my personal area of interest. This is what I'm deeply invested in, is especially classical Greek literature and archaic Greek literature, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and Greek lyric poetry. Well, I think probably many of you have encountered some form of the literary reception of the classical tradition in your daily lives. I know my nieces are absolutely crazy over the Percy Jackson series, literary merits being what they are of that. But in addition to this, when we look at our movies, when we look at our literature, we can see reuse, we can see adaptation and change existing in these texts, in these works of art, whatever they are, poetry, art, actual visual art. So we see a tremendously complex engagement, whether it is with the original sources themselves or with something that we call reception. So there's your original primary source, the Iliad, the Odyssey. We can go right to those. If you're studying Greek, you can read those texts in their original and experience something that someone 2,700 years ago experienced, which is really cool. But you can also gain access to all of the receptions of that text over the last 2,700 years too. It was reinterpreted in Rome. It was reinterpreted during the medieval period. It was reinterpreted during the Renaissance. It was absolutely a source of fascination during the Romantic era, the early 1800s. So there's so much literature that has used and has relied on these classical texts that by studying the originals, you really expand your worldview in its reception in Western literature. And not only that, but the plots, the narratives, the basic frames of the stories are very often repeated in many of the movies that we know, whether or not we know it sometimes. So one modern horror movie, actually just from last year, The Lighthouse, I don't know if any of you have seen it. This is one that uses these kinds of ancient dichotomies. You have Neleus, the sort of protean sea creature that's able to change shape and form on the one hand, and you have a Prometheus figure on the other, person who just needs to know, who's invested in knowledge, and it's a kind of struggle between these two. Very, very creepy movie. Only Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, I believe. There are only two characters in it. But Pan's Labyrinth, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The Godfather, one of my favorites. These are all movies that in some way use, adapt, and rework classical themes, classical narratives. So the study of classics allows you to better understand, appreciate, and discuss so much of the literature and so much of the art that we engage with every single day. This might be, you might find yourself wanting to write about it in a newspaper column or something like that, or just being able to discuss it. So this is another avenue. I don't want to take up too much time. I seem already starting to do that, so I'll get moving on. And the last one on here, comic books too. They're a huge part of our culture. Comic books rely very intensely on the same kind of mythological developments and in developments of mythological narratives that we see. The pressure to create new stories about familiar figures. Well, how do you do it? How do you do that when you have a character like Spider-Man, where everyone knows how Spider-Man became Spider-Man? Well, you adapt, you change, you insert a story between stories that you've already seen before. It's exactly what the ancients did with figures like Heracles, Zeus, Apollo. We knew them, they knew them intensely well. Well, there's always demand for new stories about these great figures. So this is how they did it. So it's a really great kind of point of comparison that our own culture offers us to understand and kind of analyze the ancient world too. So there's a two-way street that happens. And finally, the other part that I really wanted to emphasize is that by studying the classics, by especially Greek and Latin, the languages themselves, you gain access to so much medical and biological terminology. It's astonishing. And I'm going to speak from my personal experience on this one. I have always enjoyed the sciences and biology, but I didn't realize how helpful it would be until after I took Greek and Latin to know these languages. I waited until my junior year to take biology. And when I was going through and needed to memorize so many of the terms that I would be drilled and quizzed on, I knew them because I knew Greek and Latin. I mean, I didn't necessarily know them just from the context, but it's really quite clear. It's shockingly clear sometimes, and how literal some of these terms tend to be. So this offers you a great pathway if you choose to go into the hard sciences themselves, because the founders of so many of these fields, the modern fields themselves of sciences, were, like Thomas Jefferson and our founders, educated in this tradition where in order to be admitted to the university, you needed to know Greek and Latin. So which language would they use when they started writing about these things and talking about these things? Well, the only one that you could be guaranteed that if you wrote in, other people of the same intellectual caliber would know was Latin or Greek. So that's where we get these terms from. So I had to, of course, include some of my favorites. Tyrannosaurus Rex. I mean, this is the one we all know when we're little kids, right? We know these Greek and Latin terms when we're children, without knowing it, right? Pachycephalosaurus is another one of my favorite. The thick head lizard, right? Tyrannosaurus Rex, we know that one, Tyrant Lizard King. So all through our language, all through our biological language and taxonomies, in actual medical, the actual medical field, so terms like tachycardia, well, if you studied Greek, you'd know what that means. Hepatitis, inflammation of your liver, your HAPAR, if you're in Greek. So yeah, these are all instantly recognizable, instantly familiar to you if you know Greek and Latin. So that's the last I want to sort of emphasize. So here are some more figures because we need some. We always need more. Be like these guys. Be like Copernicus, Martin Luther, Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Jefferson, Susan B. Anthony, another really great figure of American history, Frederick Douglass, Marie Curie, and Albert Einstein. Study classics. All right.
I think I might be learning equally as much as our student audience tonight, which is great. Thank you, Dr. Ali and Dr. Vandermeer. So while we wait for Dr. Deem to get his slides going, I will touch on pre-law just for a second. And because we've had a couple of questions about pre-law in the chat, pre-law at Syracuse is what we call an advising track, not a major. So you take any major you want. History or classics are popular for all the reasons we've been exploring tonight. Great options. But you can do anything you like at Syracuse. You'll still get pre-law advising, and that will just ensure that the major you took, you added on the extracurricular experiences, research, or an internship, or a few extra classes in your electives to be competitive for law school. So at Syracuse, pick literally any major you want, go to law school. That's kind of the short version of pre-law at Syracuse. And if you'd like to set up a separate meeting with me to talk about pre-law advising, I'd be more than happy to do that. And with that, we will hand the mic over to Professor Deem.
Yeah, hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Albrecht Deem, and no one can pronounce it. I am a professor in the history department. My specialty is actually medieval history or early medieval history, reaching back partly in the ancient world. So I'm also very closely related to classics and classical civilization. And another connection is that I actually work a lot together with Professor Vandermeer. We're writing books together. He is the language expert. I'm the history expert. And we're mostly writing about medieval monks and nuns. I put my email address out there because I hope that if you have any questions, that you will contact me and I will be most happy to respond, or even to set up a Zoom meeting for a personal conversation. And I make this point because that applies basically to all professors at Syracuse University, and especially to the history professors. We're not some gods out there who are sort of to be approached with reverence. We're normal human beings, and we are very often open to any kind of questions, problems, ideas you have. We want to get to know you. So now I hope that my PowerPoint presentation actually moves. Yeah. Who we are in our history department 25 scholars. And scholars means we basically have two different jobs. We're teachers, we teach you, and we're there for you, but we are also researchers, and we write books, we write articles, we go to conferences and talk about our work. And this is just a couple of examples you see here on the screen of books that people in the history department published in the last couple of years. And this is important for you, not that you have to read all these books. Of course, we would be happy if you do, but it's important for you because we're all world-leading experts in our fields, and we're all want to teach you the state of research, the state of how to do history, about new methodologies of all sorts. And we're doing all history in very, very different ways. So some of us are working in archives and can teach you about working in archives. Some of us work with ancient or medieval manuscripts and teach you how to work with them. Others work with oral history, and their research is based on interviews, like, for example, that book of Professor McCormick. So there are lots and lots of different ways of doing history, lots and lots of different methodologies, and we want to teach you these ways of doing history of studying history based on our own research work. So this is very important to keep us in mind. And one advice for you, if you want to get to know us, professors are usually suffering from vanity. And that means if you ask us, what are you doing? What is your research? What are your research interests? The only danger is that we will not stop talking for hours and hours and hours, because we are really excited about what we are doing. So now I hope that, I hope this works. A little bit about what we do and what you will do when you decide to take to declare a history major or a minor. That's also, of course, also possible. And you can combine a history minor wonderfully, for example, with classics or with religion or basically with any field. We have different concentrations, and you will pick one of them, either American history or European history or global history, which means that most of your courses, not all of them, will be in these three fields. And I'm always partial, of course, to European history because that's my field, or to global history, because one of the really exciting things about a history department is that we have, more than most other departments, an emphasis on global history. So I'm carrying around an accent. I'm German. And I recently counted, I think there are 8 or 9 nations represented in the faculty, in the teachers, the professors of the history department. So we have people from Southeast Asia. We have one colleague coming from Guatemala. We have a colleague coming from Kenya. We have someone from New Zealand, someone from Britain, of course. So you'll have teachers from all over the world, and we are, I think, especially strong in global history. Now, what do you do when you study history? And one of the ideas a lot of students have who come to the university is that history is about learning facts, about memorizing facts, about stories that you have to learn, and then you'll be able to retell them. And this is, I think, only the smaller part of what you do as a history student. Of course, you get a broader overview. You learn about the most important events and dates in American history or ancient history or medieval history, but this is it's a skeleton, but the real meat is what I would call doing history. History consists of learning how to do historical research, about working with historical sources and analyzing them, and very important, learning how to ask new questions to the existing source material. And these questions are sometimes very personal, and these are your questions. And what you learn is how to answer them, how to work with source material, or you could say how to shoot your ideas and your questions and your hypotheses into your source material. That's the basis of studying history. So it's not about learning facts. It's about learning how to figure out things, how to answer your questions, how to test your ideas. And that, of course, includes learning very, very different, very diverse techniques to deal with primary sources, to engage with the work other historians have done before you. So it's a lot about learning methods of research. And these are also methods you can apply in any other fields, of course, also classics, of course, also humanities, but also it sort of trains you in a way of thinking that you can basically apply for any field you study, but also for almost every professional field. Now, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of classes we teach. And this is only a small fragment. There is much more. We teach about 60, 70 classes every semester. And you're very basically free to choose from these classes whatever fits most with your interests. So we have survey classes, and usually these are larger lecture classes, very traditional with a professor lecturing, but also always combined with discussion sections where you can ask your questions and discuss your material. So examples would be surveys on American history. We have two, one until 1865 and then one in modern American history. We have the same in European history. We have a survey on the history of the ancient world, which also ties into classics, and that's actually one of the courses I'm teaching. We have classes on medieval and Renaissance Europe. So these are the larger overview courses. And then we have courses on themes and topics. And here are just a couple of examples. I teach myself a class at this semester on saints and sinners in the Middle Ages. There are classes on the Second World War in cinema. There are classes in the history of democracy. And these are just a couple of examples. And if you're interested, go on our department website and we have very detailed course descriptions, and you see if there is anything that you want to know more about. I put one class on the list, and this is History 301 Practicum in History. This is where you learn the ropes of historical work. This is sort of the methodology course where you learn how to do your own historical research, how to find material, how to analyze material, also how to write history papers. So this is, of course, an essential part of studying history. And then at the end of your career as an undergraduate student, you will take a seminar that allows you to do real original historical research, guided by one of us as professors, but this is your chance to contribute to our work. And that brings me to what do you learn? Some of us become historians. Most students will not end up being professional historians, but you learn critical thinking, of course. You learn how to deal with texts or artifacts, and how to ask questions. Very important, you learn how to write on an academic level and how to communicate. So writing is, of course, only one way of communication. You learn how to present your thoughts and your ideas in a way that other people can understand and then can think your thoughts in a way. And you learn how to place things in their broader historical context. And if you read everything, you will learn that everything has its history. So the wonderful thing about history, you think about history primarily as political history, history of rulers, of wars, all these things. And to be very honest, I find that very boring. Some people get really excited about it, but there is so much more that you can historicize, that you can give its own history. You can do a history of commodities. You can a history of religion. I'm doing a history of saints and sinners. I'm doing a history of monastic life. So everything has its historical side, and you learn how to explore it. And these qualifications, these skills you learn, they're basically applicable in any field, any professional field. So these are just some. So education, of course, you become a teacher. You can work, or lots of historians work in various fields of culture, work in museums. If you look at the careers of politicians today, many of them have a history degree. Historians can think and write and communicate in the world in a way that's very attractive to business. Law we already talked about a little bit, and you also find tons and tons of historians in the media, in journalism. And one last thing, because this is very close to my heart, is also something special that we do at the history department. We very much foster independent research conducted by the students themselves. And we have a student-run journal, Chronos. So it's edited by students, and it publishes research work, publishes papers, research projects that were performed, that were conducted by our undergraduate students. So you can, even during your career as an undergraduate student, get out your first publication in our journal and put that fat on your CV as something that really showcases your skills. Okay, that's what I wanted to tell you, and I'm open to any kind of questions.
So I'm just taking a quick look at the chat. I know we had a question about study abroad as it relates to classics. I think study abroad as it relates to history is also very interesting. I'm not sure, I don't actually know how closely professors in Syracuse are connected to our study abroad programs. Maybe you all can answer that question for me, but if you have examples of classes that are happening abroad, advantages of studying abroad at Syracuse. On the admissions side, I can tell you students that study abroad is extremely well done and very popular at Syracuse. On average, when you're looking at college students at four-year institutions like ours, about 11% of students are studying abroad, and at Syracuse, about 50% are. And that's for a few reasons. Our programs are very flexible, they're affordable. Syracuse is an expensive school, so I'm not discounting what it costs to get here in the first place. But once you're on campus, if you want to go abroad, work a part-time student job, save your money, you can send yourself. And that's an uncommon thing. And you can go at any time during the year, over spring break, during the summer. So studying abroad in general is something very popular. Some students even apply to Syracuse just for study abroad. And I don't agree with doing that, but it's true. So if study abroad is something you're interested in, there are certainly opportunities for you, but maybe our faculty tonight can tell you a little bit more.
Yeah, I can say a few things, namely that we as faculty do not teach abroad. Unfortunately, that used to be the practice way back in the 1970s and 80s, I think. So there is local faculty at in Florence, for instance, and I know there is one or two faculty there who's offering on a regular basis courses that are related to the classics field, like mythology or ancient history. So if students who study classics or classical civilization in our program go there, of course we recognize, we acknowledge, we give credit for the courses the students take there. Every now and then I can imagine that a student who is really good in Italian, because that is sort of a ramification for studying in Italy, or that comes with studying in Florence, might take classics courses at the local University of Florence. This seems to happen occasionally, but that's a rarity. And of course it would require that you know Italian really well in order to get enough out of it. Professor Ali, have you any experience with SU abroad personally?
I do, yeah. So when I was an undergrad, we had like an agreement in addition to the SU abroad programs. There are two really great universities, one in Rome and one in Athens. So there's the Centro in Rome, and then there's CYA De Chemis in Athens. These are actual universities that are dedicated strictly to the classics in both of those cities. As SU students, you can apply to those universities and take a summer, a semester, or a year. They are phenomenal. So I went to Athens when I was an undergrad at a semester there, and it was life-changing. I mean, especially for someone like me, this was the first time I'd left the country. So that opportunity was extraordinary. And Professor Vandermeer did an excellent job of demonstrating that there is astonishing financial aid available for undergrads. So for me, cost was very much on my mind when I was applying. But because of those external funding opportunities, it makes it very affordable. Both the university, there are scholarships, I'm sure, within the university, they'll be more competitive. And then there are ones at the national level. So CAMWES, the Classical Association of Midwestern States, is astonishingly generous. They give, I think, somewhere around a dozen scholarships just to try to get students to Europe, to get them invested, because it's one of their primary objectives is to try to bring non-traditional students to gain them access to the classical tradition. So those opportunities are there. They're very robust. They're very exciting, and you get a chance to meet some really extraordinarily interesting faculty, other students. It's wonderful when you do SU abroad that you potentially have other students from Syracuse to meet there, but something like the Centro, you'll get to meet students from all over the country too. So there are different opportunities. There are different, there are definitely different paths depending on your interests. But I think, yeah, if you were to major in classics and really wanted to study, say, Greek archaeology or Roman archaeology, those are two really great opportunities because that's one of their kind of wheelhouses. So I got a chance to do archaeological work when I was in Athens and topography of Athens, the class on the topography of Athens. And there's no better way than to read an ancient text right in front of it, the thing that it's talking about. So the Parthenon or, the Temple of Hephaestus in the Agora or something like that, to read Plato, that they're talking about just strolling past the Stoa of Zeus. And hey, there's the Stoa of Zeus. So those are definitely something to keep on your radar there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So it looks like we are close on time, about 1 minute remaining. We do have a pretty involved question for Dr. Ali in the chat. So Dr. Ali, I hope you don't mind. I gave that student your email address. So
No.
So be sure to take a glance at that. But to the student that sent that question, you can email Dr. Ali to chat. All of you are also welcome to email me. I have a lot of information using our website and in conversations with our professors that I can tell you about these programs. And if the question is over my head and too specific for my expertise, I absolutely lean on our faculty when answering your questions. So you can get reliable information from me as well. My email address is on the screen. So thank you all for attending the session. I learned more than I've learned in any Syracuse session I've ever led, and I've led a lot tonight. So thank you to our professors. I'm sure our students learned a lot. I watched you learning from each other as well, which was great. So I really enjoyed having you all three professors during this session. Students, give a thumbs up or a thank you in the chat to our professors. This is not their job. They should not have to be sitting in their homes after work hours, talking to students that don't even go to Syracuse yet, but because they love their programs and they want to help you and they're kind enough to help me, they're here supporting the session. So we really want to make sure that they know how much we appreciate their time. So thank you all. This should not be the last time I hear from you students. I'm sure you'll have questions pop into your head as you're dreaming about all of the things we discussed tonight. So please be in touch with me when you have follow-up questions. And again, thanks everyone for helping me with this session. I'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
For organizing.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.